de eso, agradecemos muchísimo que estés aquí. Seguramente se viene un aprendizaje increíble. Y dicho eso, dejo de compartir acá mi pantalla y te doy totalmente a ti control de la sala.
Thank you, Fari. Hi, everybody. Let me just share my screen with sound. There we go. Can everybody see that? Hopefully that's a yes.
Yeah, super.
Great. So really incredible to meet you all, everybody. I'm also happy to see lots of you up in Mexico. I went to Mexico last year for my holidays and had an incredible time, especially the food. So I hope to visit more of South America someday, different countries as well. But we're not here to talk about food, unfortunately. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Gemma Lord. I consider myself to be a multidisciplinary designer. You can see here on my slide, I've called myself many different types of designer over the years, from product design, interaction design, communication design, but I realized I should probably call myself a service designer, because service design, in my opinion, ties all of these different things together. That's because I consider a service to be something which helps people to do something and makes complex things and problems in the world better. And we'll get more into that later on in my talk. So I thought it'd be helpful, before I share my inspiration, to just tell you a little bit about my journey and how I came to be a designer and a service designer. And so you have that context. And actually, it's a bit of a boring story, because I had a very linear path to becoming a designer. Lots of people at IDEO come from different industries and different businesses, but I actually just really enjoyed art and design when I was at school, at high school. And so I decided that I wanted to go and be a designer. And so I went to Glasgow School of Art, which is the building you can see in the photograph there, to study on a course called product design. So when I thought I was going to study product design, in my mind, I was going to be making chairs. I really liked furniture. I really liked making things. I was like, great, I'm going to go and design chairs. That's going to be fun. And I expected to be crafting physical things that, in my opinion, looked cool. But this isn't what happened. When I arrived at Glasgow School of Art to study product design, I found myself in a room a bit like this, surrounded by post-it notes and people talking about users, people talking about service design. And I didn't really know what it was, and I wasn't sure whether or not I liked it. So I had my own little rebellion, and I decided to spend 2 years studying abroad where I made furniture. So I went to Stockholm, I went to Paris, and I studied at 2 different design schools where I learned to make things. I joined a collective of different designers where I made furniture, and I showed it at different design fairs. But I quickly found this to be really superficial. I felt like I was making things, but I wasn't making things better. And so I came to this realization that I needed to shift my mindset. I didn't just want to make things, but I wanted to make things better for people and for the planet. And so I decided to go on a bit of an exploration journey where I could explore lots of different types of design. And I managed to find a way to bring them all together again, coming back to the idea of helping people to do things, especially if that thing sits in the future and feels unknown. For example, I worked at a design studio called Native Design, where they help people to use digital products and services more seamlessly. I worked on a project called the Risk Center, where we helped people to understand the risks that children face in daily life. I worked with a designer who explored synthetic biology, and she helped people to understand the possibilities of genetically designing organisms and the problems that that could create and also solve, hopefully. And my personal master's thesis project was around helping the citizens of Scotland explore their identity if Scotland voted for independence back in it was 2014, and what would happen if Scotland could actually join the Arctic as an Arctic country. So I explored all these different types of design. And after doing that, I became a professional designer, and I've worked at consultancies called Normally and now IDEO. I've been at IDEO for 6 years now. And I chose to work in consulting so that I can help make things better across a diverse range of challenges for a diverse range of people. So at IDEO, we're lucky in that we get to work across retail, fashion, automotive, technology, sustainability, media, and many, many more, pretty much any industry you can think of. But what ties all of these projects together at IDEO is the idea that we are trying to make a positive impact for people and for the planet. And of course, because business is what makes the world go round, also to create more profit, but profit through doing good things and making things better for people. So that's enough about me. This is about you and the journey that you're about to embark upon to learn more about service design, which is incredibly exciting. So what I want to share with you today isn't actually knowledge or advice, but insight and inspiration about how service design is going to change the way that you think, the mindsets that you have, and how you're going to approach complex challenges in your future careers, whether you call yourself a service designer or not. So I have a bit of a news flash, and that is that once you start thinking like a service designer, you will never, ever, ever see the world the same way again. And that can be a blessing or a curse, depending on how good the services are around you. You will forever be thinking about how they can be better once you learn the mindsets of a service designer. But I personally think that is a really wonderful thing. Even if you are not calling yourself a service designer or working on a service design project, thinking like a service designer can be incredibly valuable in all kinds of contexts, teams, and situations, both professionally and personally. And so what I want you to take away from this inspiration shot today is an open-mindedness to how you are going to change along this journey and how these mindsets can become your superpowers in your professional and personal lives. So I'm going to share today 5 superpowers that service design has taught me and how they're helpful in ways that I believe will be valuable to you in any team and any organization. I saw there are lots of different businesses and companies you work for in your introductions. So it's incredibly exciting to think that all of these mindsets are going to be embedded now in those organizations. So I'm going to share the superpowers, and each one is followed by a story about how I've used the superpower at IDEO. And I hope you'll ask me lots of questions about them afterwards as well. So let's get into it. The first superpower is the power of collaboration. Service design is really a team sport, whether you're collaborating with your colleagues, with clients, or with your end customers. It takes a whole village of people with different expertise and different perspectives to understand and solve a problem as broad as a service. It's not about having all of the skills yourself. And I think that's something that I learned early on, is I thought I had to know everything, and you don't. It's actually about knowing how to collaborate with people with different skills from you and with your end users to be able to solve problems for them. So to share an example, I worked on a project for a global accounting software company who wanted to help their 6 million small business customers to reach net zero carbon emissions. This is due to the pressure of climate change increasing globally. We're seeing lots more noise about climate change and obviously climate change related disasters across the world. And regulation in most countries across the world is being implemented by governments and big businesses, and that is rippling through the supply chains, impacting small businesses. But big businesses usually have resources to be able to manage that change, and small businesses do not. So they're at risk in the future of being actually not able to operate if they can't adapt to reduce their carbon emissions. So we set out to learn what it would take for small business owners to reduce their carbon emissions. But because of the scale and diversity of our user group, we had 6 million different businesses, that's huge. We couldn't do this alone. So we recruited 15 different small business owners from very different businesses who joined a customer panel where together we could collaborate to find solutions to their problems. So this group included people from, for example, somebody who owned a champagne bar, somebody who ran a falconry centre with birds of prey, a restaurant owner, a taxi company. So people with very different business needs and challenges. And each of them collaborated with us and with each other because we found a value was created in them also learning from one another as well as us learning from them by sharing their experiences and building on our ideas. So we often create ideas, early ideas, IDEO, and then we share it with our users to collaborate together so that they can make those ideas better. And learning about each of these businesses showed us their needs, so what they would need to be able to reduce their carbon emissions, potential constraints, so barriers that meant they might not be able to do that, and what it would take to make our solution usable and desirable by small business owners. So during this process, we learned that small businesses don't really have the time or the resources to think about climate change. And we wanted our client to suggest small and simple steps that would save them money as well as carbon. There's no point in reducing your carbon emissions if you can't survive as a business. And they wanted us to use data that our client already had from their accounting software about each business. So this led to the design of a range of different touch points and a product, which actually launched earlier this year, which is really amazing to see, to help small business owners take small and simple steps to saving carbon and money. And this approach is one that we wouldn't have taken if we hadn't collaborated with our end users. So collaboration was really the superpower that unlocked the whole idea. Okay, the second superpower is the power of convening. By convening, I mean unlocking and empowering expertise in others. I already kind of mentioned that as a service designer, you don't need to know everything. And the problems that you work on are huge and much more complex than one person can know how to solve. The problems are much bigger than a single chair, for example. And it's a really humbling feeling. You start to realize that you're just part of a bigger picture, but you have a really powerful role to play, which is the power of convening. So as a designer, your role is often to listen to different people's perspectives and experiences, to assemble their knowledge together and acknowledge that you can never know all of the answers. But what you can do is help the people who have the answers to activate them and to bring them together to be able to solve a common problem. To give an example, I worked on a project with the UK's National Health Service, which we call the NHS. NHS is described as a single organisation, but in reality, it's not true. The NHS is actually over 200 different trusts, and a trust is essentially a business within the NHS, such as a hospital or a doctor's surgery. And our challenge was to transform the mental health services for children and young people to make them easier to access digitally. But each individual trust or each individual business within the NHS has a very different way of doing things and a very different system and very different problems. And to add to that, I am not a healthcare professional, IDEO are not healthcare professionals. And so we couldn't possibly create something bespoke or deeply rooted in each separate trust. On top of that, our user group was literally everybody. Usually when you're doing service design, you want to identify a target user or specific people you're designing for. But in this case, we actually had to design for everyone, from nurses to clinicians, administrators, and procurement teams. It was incredibly complex. So instead of trying to understand everything, we convened knowledge from people and places as far and wide as we could across those different organizations. And we used that knowledge to design a series of masterclasses, tools, and best practice case studies, which each individual within the NHS could access and apply to digitally transform their own piece of that puzzle. We delivered these masterclasses to others, a kind of train the trainer idea, and built them in a central place where they could be added to over time as more and more people digitize their services. In a way, we actually created a digital convening space of sorts. And this approach allowed us to quickly design something that could help our users to help themselves and apply that knowledge to their own bit of the business in a way that meant it could scale really quickly across that complex organization, something which would have taken us years, not weeks, if we had not used the power of convening. So that's why convening is my second superpower. The third superpower is the power of persuasion. And this is using empathy to convince people to act. And I don't know if any of you have seen the film The Jungle Book, but the snake in The Jungle Book is called Kaa, and he has these eyes which persuade people to do things. So I thought I'd use him as my character for this one. But persuasion is a funny one because you don't immediately think of it as being a service designer superpower. But in my experience, it's one of the most important ones. And that's because most of the challenges you'll ever work on require mainly senior people within organizations to believe in the need to change and be motivated to do something about it. And that's where empathy comes in. When a person experiences empathy, their brain is actually tricked into thinking it has experienced something itself, and that makes somebody far more likely to care about your cause. And what do service designers have in bucket loads? Stories from users. And stories from users can be told to build empathy for a problem and convince people that they need to do something to act. So to share an example for this one, I was working on a project for a large digital and media retailer, and their customers are mainly middle-aged women, so women around 35 to 60 or 70 years old. Through working with this retailer, we noticed that one need that almost all of their customers have in common is the need for support through the ups and downs of the menopause. And the menopause is still a topic that's largely taboo. I don't know how it is in South America, but in Europe, not many people talk about the menopause and people feel embarrassed about it. But you'd think this would be a really obvious opportunity area to solve a problem that almost 100% of your customers have experienced, are currently experiencing, or will experience in the near future. But there was one problem. The leadership of this company are mainly men who didn't understand the need to address this problem and didn't want to talk about it. So we used the power of persuasion by helping those men to empathize with the reality of menopause, which is often not spoken about. We asked each of the women that we'd interviewed during the project to film parts of their daily life. We couldn't show their faces for legal reasons, so we asked them instead to show us the context around their lives and talk about their experience of menopause. Using this footage, we created a film which we played to the leadership of this retail company, and it created a huge emotional response. So much so that one of the CEOs was actually crying. He started crying on the call and he said, "I need to go and talk to my wife immediately," because he realized the impact that menopause has on people's lives. So what was the result of this? The retailer chose to invest in this opportunity, and they've now rolled out a series of shows on TV, experiences and online content and products that can support women on their journey through menopause. So using storytelling, building empathy through customer voices gave us the power to persuade a retailer to take a leap, not just make incremental change, and make things better for millions of women. Okay, we're nearly there. The fourth superpower is the power of navigating the fog, and that means trusting the design process to find the right direction. So some of you will have experience of this already, others you will experience it soon, but service design is often a messy and confusing process. We usually don't know where we're going or what the answer is going to be, because that's the whole point. If you knew what the answer is already, then you don't need to go on the journey and you don't need to go through the design process. The superpower of a service designer in this moment is to embrace ambiguity, as we say at IDEO, and know that being in the fog, being in the mist, is how we come to solutions that aren't at first obvious or immediately visible. Trusting your instinct and relying on your experience in these moments is where the superpower lies. and why teams will look to you to lead them through uncertain times. Last year, I was working with a foresight and innovation team at a major sports brand to help them understand the emerging needs of personal and amateur athletes and fans. To do this, we had to synthesize inputs and learnings from over 36 research reports, 30 primary user interviews in 3 markets, 19 expert interviews from 10 domains, and 11 interviews with internal stakeholders. That is a lot of information. And of course, all of those different inputs create a fog with too much information and too many different signals to make sense of them. So how did we approach it? We trusted the synthesis process and helped navigate our clients away from the noise and the conflicting signals, instead focusing on the enduring needs of sport. These are the reasons beneath the reasons why people do sport, and they stand true regardless of context and trend. Once you get to that level of meaning, the insights become much clearer and help to make sense of the rest of the research. We use these enduring needs and the future signals to help our clients understand the opportunity spaces which they could act on to be relevant in the future of sport. And hopefully you'll see them come to fruition in the coming years. By using the power of navigation, we helped our client make sense of too much research, turning a feeling of overwhelm into a set of clear focus areas that they can act on. Okay, last, I saved the best one till last. This is my favorite superpower, the power of envisioning, and that is to take ideas and choices and make them tangible so that you can help people understand them and accelerate action. So envisioning is the ability to take something that people are talking about and turn it into something they can see, touch, experience, and feel. It's making something feel tangible so that instead of talking about a hypothesis, people can turn the conversation into action and something real. It honestly helps people make decisions much, much faster. It allows you to iterate and it allows you to move forward. The beauty of envisaging is it can be super simple, such as a mock-up of a screen, a cardboard prototype, a role play of a service. It all helps people think differently and converge on what they want. We were asked by a luggage company to help them explore ways to be more sustainable. And so we designed a concept for a luggage subscription service. On paper, this seemed like a good idea, but we wanted to understand in practice what the service would involve and whether it was desirable for customers, viable financially, and feasible to deliver. So we set out to prototype the service. We did all of the legwork, but for the end customers, it felt real. This helped our clients experience what it would be like to run the service themselves and what it would take to make it real. Following the project, they ran a pilot where they did this at scale, and they later launched it fully into the market. By envisaging the future service, we helped our stakeholders align, stop swirling, build a service, and move forward with it. And I have a very short video to play which shows you a bit about how we did this. It's just 1 minute long.
Travel Light's mission is to give millennials the flexibility and freedom to explore every corner of the world, without the burden of baggage to do so. To quickly learn about how Travel Light could fit into people's lives, we set out to bring a simple version of the service to life and test it in the real world. We recruited 3 millennials to take part in our experiment. Meet our travellers, Gianna, Bhavna and Christina. We sent them a link to the Travel Light website where they could learn more about the service and select a bag for their upcoming trip. The IDEO team then stepped into the shoes of the service courier and delivered bags to each participant's home during their preferred time slot. We added personal touches to the bag, such as trip information and tailored travel recommendations for each participant's destination. Each participant then embarked on a journey with their Kipling bag. When they returned, we went to visit them again to collect the bags and to hear what they thought of the service.
That's just a super short video, but you can see that for a user to feel the service is real doesn't mean the service has to be real. We were acting as the service to deliver it to customers.
Travel Light
All right, so those are the 5 superpowers that you're about to learn, which no matter what challenges you face or services you try to design will help you to make things better. I hope you're really, really excited for the course you have ahead, because it's going to be amazing, and you're going to be changed forever as you start to think in these new ways. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. I'm also going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your faces.
Hi, Gemma. It's me, Patty here. First of all, thanks for this amazing talk. I think I'm talking in behalf of all our students when I say that we learn, and it's an honor meeting you and having you here. I'm going to change my language to Spanish so I can proceed to make the question. Tim, voy a empezar a hablar español para que ustedes también se sientan en confianza. Perdón, estaba hablando con el micrófono apagado. Para que puedan hacer una pregunta a Gemma con toda la confianza del mundo. Dicho esto, Gemma, me gustaría preguntarte justamente cómo mencionabas un superpoder que es navegar en la niebla, ¿no? Y a mí me gustaría como preguntarte, ¿cuándo tú ya decides que puedes seguir navegando a través de esa neblina o cuándo tienes que parar y replanteártelo? Porque sé que está mucho esta parte de trust the process, pero cuándo ya no debemos confiar en el proceso y a lo mejor dar un paso atrás y decir, ok, hay cosas que tenemos que cambiar.
That's a great question. It's something you definitely learn with experience, and you might get it wrong a few times first. But really, that's a good process should include moments where you reflect on the process itself and reflect on where you are in that process. So you'll have moments where you diverge as a team and you go in lots of different directions in the fog. And then you have moments where you come back together and you have to analyze as a team and say, okay, are we going in the direction we thought we were going in? Are we going fast enough? Are we bringing people on that journey with us in the fog? And it's important before you embark on that journey, before you start the process, to have what we call a North Star or a goal or a desired outcome that you want to get to, so that when you're in the fog, you can look up at the star and say, okay, is that still where we want to go? And are we getting there? So you intentionally construct sort of milestones along the way to be able to know whether you're going in the right direction. But yeah, it's something that you do need to trust your intuition sometimes as well.
Súper, buenísimo, ¿no? Muchas gracias. Creo que sí, lo que mencionas es clave completamente. Y Tim, no sé si igual te quieran alguna pregunta, con toda la confianza, se puede hacer en español. Sin miedo, Tim.
Ya tengo una pregunta. Justo en el paso 2, tú decías que tenías que diseñar para todos. Eso es como que un poco extraño también, porque normalmente como que tenemos que establecer un público objetivo. En este caso, ¿cómo lo hiciste? ¿Lo dividiste por partes? Sí fuiste por partes y a la final todos formaron parte. ¿Cómo desarrollaste esa parte?
Yeah, it was difficult. We tried to make sure that we understood the main user groups. So, and we had representatives from those groups in the people that we learned from. So in the people that we interviewed in our research process. And then we were able to put them into kind of typologies of people. So for example, clinicians who would be delivering the service, leaders who would be deciding the strategy of how those services would be delivered. And that way we were able to kind of create broad strokes of user groups, but recognizing that within that there would be also different needs, which is why we created content that could be adapted for people's bespoke needs as they went along. but yeah, it's not ideal, but sometimes, especially if you're designing something like a public service that operates on a national scale or an international scale, you do have to be more broad, but it's helpful to identify within those broad groups specific types of profile that you might be, of people who might be using your service. But yeah, make it adaptable.
Listo, tenemos una pregunta también de Eric. Eric, por favor, adelante.
Claro que sí. Hi, Gemma. I'm going to try to do this in English. Let me turn my video on. How do you manage stakeholder expectations? I find it a little bit difficult. When there's like in the beginning of the design process, usually everybody has like different ideas of what the outcome is going to be. So yeah, I just want to know how you do it. And great talk, by the way.
Thank you. That's a great question, and it's an art form. Every stakeholder is different, so it does have to be tailored. But I would say the best things you can do are to be very transparent. So always at IDEO, we work collaboratively with our stakeholders so that they see the design along the journey, and there is never that moment at the end where you're showing them something that they haven't seen before. So no surprises. Surprises are not good in the design process. And you know, if you have lots of stakeholders with different expectations, the best thing to do is to have a workshop where you bring them together and you ask them to share in front of each other those expectations, the outcomes that they want, so that you can start to align them and actually synthesize them and help prioritize them, because often you have to say, this is the most important outcome, and these outcomes can come later, or these outcomes can be delivered through different pieces of work. So it's really, yeah, about like getting the expectations to the surface and sharing transparently as a group. Hold a workshop with all of your stakeholders to help them come to an agreement on what's most important, and then continually check in on that as you go.
Gracias.
Listo, Eric, no, gracias a ti. Tim, tenemos espacio para una pregunta más, así que los incentivo a que justamente puedan hacer la última, si existe por ahí. Pero en la oportunidad, creo que, bueno, está con Gemma, tiene una experiencia increíble, creo que podemos hacer una pregunta que justamente nos puede volar la cabeza, alguna duda que se tenga, Tim. Recuerden que puede ser en español, sin ningún problema. Están tímidos, Tim. Listo. Diego, por favor, adelante.
Sí, gracias. Hola, Gemma. Ahorita con lo que comentabas en la presentación, yo tenía duda que al momento de presentar un servicio a negocio y persuadirlo para que el servicio se haga realidad, ¿cómo presentas el servicio a negocio? O sea, ¿qué incluye tu presentación además de las historias de usuario que nos comentabas?
Yeah, so that's usually the moment where the rubber hits the road, if you like, and clients say, oh, it's a great idea, but like, so what? How do we make it real? What do we actually do? And you can see the fear in their eyes sometimes as they realize that IDEO is going to go away and they have to deliver this service now. So usually what we do is we work really hard to develop a roadmap, so a plan essentially to help them understand how they start really, really small and then how they scale that service. So usually we would recommend starting with a pilot or what we call a beta, which is a small version of the service that delivers value to end customers, but is quite low fidelity and doesn't necessarily operate at scale. And then if the business can deliver that, and that's usually something we would work with them to create, they can then start to scale that in increments as the business gains the capabilities needed to be able to run the service at a much larger scale. So it's really just about taking it in small steps and continually learning. Like, we never design a service and it's done. actually when your service is launched into the market is when you start to learn more, because all of a sudden you have way more users. And so it's about creating the mindsets in the business as well to continually learn and continually improve on those services and evolve them as they need to.
Bueno.
Súper, gracias, Gemma.
Listo, Gemma, muchísimas gracias, Tim. Pues listo, terminamos con nuestro espacio de preguntas. Pero antes de cerrar, Gemma, quiero agradecerte de parte del Colectivo 23, de parte de los estudiantes, de parte mía, por esta plática, por este Inspiration Shot tan potente, tan increíble. Como te decía anteriormente, creo que hablo de parte de todos los estudiantes cuando digo que realmente fue algo bastante bueno y aprendimos muchísimo. Sé que estamos un poquito medio sobre el tiempo, pero me gustaría ver si existe la posibilidad de que podamos tomarnos una foto todos, todas y todos juntos. Igual ahí, como vemos, Melissa se une a las palmadas, a los claps, justamente por esta charla súper poderosa. Entonces, no, gracias a ti al contrario, Gemma. Entonces, no sé si nos podamos tomar una foto todos, todas, todos juntos. ¿Te parece bien, Gemma? Sí, súper, buenísimo, Tim. Para esto, me gustaría pedir, por favor, si pueden prender sus cámaras, si es posible. Sería increíble para que podamos salir todos, todas y todes. También podamos conocernos también, sería muy bueno. Listo, ya estoy viendo ya algunas camaritas que están prendiendo. Si no es posible, Tim, por X o Y razón, no hay ningún tema. No se apuren, igual como nos comenta César, pero estás en espíritu, eso es lo importante. Me parece súper bien. Listo, ya estamos viendo ahí algunas camaritas que se están prendiendo. Buenísimo, Tim, va que va. ¿Qué es lo que vamos a hacer acá? Muy sencillo. Sonrían afortunadamente somos un cohort grande, entonces lo que vamos a hacer es voy a tomar 2 fotografías, sonrían en ambas, porque luego hay veces que paso al otro slide de Zoom y piensan que ya sonrimos en esta y no. Así que hay que sonreír en ambas porque si no luego salimos con la poker face completamente. Dicho esto, Tim, tomo la primera foto en 3, 2, 1. Listo, Tim, denme un segundito en lo que aquí justamente Zoom nos ayuda a que se guarde el screenshot. Buenísimo. Y vamos con la segunda parte. Recuerden que sonríamos porque luego pensamos que vamos a tomar la foto y no, así que la tomo en 3, 2, 1. Listo, Tim. Buenísimo. Muchísimas, muchísimas gracias. Gemma, nuevamente, mil gracias por esta ponencia. Digo, no sé si igual tengas que retirarte por cuestiones de tiempo, pero agradecerte nuevamente. Fue algo increíble. Muchas, muchas gracias de parte de todos, todas y todes acá. Chao, chao, Gemma. Gracias, gracias.
Thank you, everyone.